Welcome to the Berlin Drawing Room. So today we're going to be painting an anemone wildflower. I hope that you all have received the reference image in the email. I'll just pull it up for a second to make sure that everybody knows which image I'm talking about. Let me see here. I have it on my other screen to look at, so to share with you all. To find it elsewhere. So this is the image that you will find in here's the link for the Zoom meeting. So you obviously all got that email. And then if you just scroll down, here is our wildflower image. And I just recently took this photo when I was in the south of France for my daughter's Easter break. So it was a lovely little meadow with olive trees, and there were lots and lots of these little bright pink anemone flowers just popping up all over the place. So it was just a clear choice for this spring class. So I trust that you all that we're all looking at the same image now. And wow, we've got people here from Oregon, from Berlin, from Georgia, from London, from New York, Virginia. Wow, lots of different places. So fantastic. It's always really fun to see how people show up from all over the world. So during this class, I'm going to give you a little taster of the kind of painting that we do in my ongoing online Botanical Watercolor Workshop Series. And that workshop will be starting in 1 week from now. And you are all very welcome to join if you want to continue painting like this. So we've got a little bit of a bigger group for the free classes, but the regular workshop group tends to be a more like small and intimate group of painting enthusiasts. And I think I see a couple of people from my class here. Alessandra, nice to see you again. And Karen, and yeah, we've got a few people from few of the regulars here as well, in all the new people. So that's always really fun. So I'm going to switch over already to my desk view. The view that I'm personally much more comfortable with, although I love seeing all of your faces. So we're going to start straight away with the drawing of this flower. So I've got my reference image on the iPad here, which is really handy because this is a small flower and we are going to, first of all, be drawing it much larger than life size so that here's a little preview of how the drawing can look. In order to get all of these details of the sepals, we're going to need to make this quite a bit larger than life size. So I like having the image on the iPad because I can zoom in, but if you have it printed out, that's also fine. Just keep in mind that we want to make the drawing of the flower big enough so that we're able to get into all this beautiful detail. And I'm just going to be doing the flower in front for now because I want to have a little bit of time at the end to you and answer any questions and see some of your paintings. So I like to keep it a little bit more simple during the free classes because I know also there are a lot of people who take this as an opportunity to try this out for the first time even, which is really fantastic. So I am using, let's see, starting out with the materials. So I gave you a pretty basic list of materials because I didn't think for a free class, anyone should have to run out and buy a bunch of things. So whatever you have at home, we're going to make it work today, but I'm going to show you just for your future reference what I'm using, which is 300-gram hot press watercolor paper. Hot press just means smooth texture. And I've got a place for mixing my colors. Something like this also works. I've got very important for painting things in a lot of detail, having a paper towel to dry your brush on, because we're going to be using a drier technique for the detail. And then a place where I can test my colors, which is here. And I've got an HB pencil. That's my preference for, oh, if I put these down, you can see better. I've got an HB pencil, which is my preference for the preparatory drawing for a watercolor. And then I've just got here a number 5 round sable watercolor brush. And I'm probably only gonna use this one brush. This is something that people who have taken my classes have probably heard me say before, but I'll just say it again, that with watercolors, these sable brushes, they're pretty expensive, but what you're able to do with one medium-sized sable brush is like better than what you can do with several synthetic brushes because of the way that it forms a very pointy tip at the very top. So there you've got almost like a number 1 size, and then it's got this little barrel in the middle that holds a lot of liquid. So then that also gives you the volume of a number 5 brush. So you can kind of use it as everything in between. Oh, looks like my screen is a bit frozen. Okay, there we go. So I'm gonna start out with a rather light drawing, but I'm going to make it now a little bit darker so that you can see it on the screen, because otherwise it's really hard to see the drawing. But I'm just telling you that so that you know your drawing can be lighter than mine. And oh yeah, somebody was just asking again the brush size. So this is a number 5 brush, like a number 5 or a number 6, as long as it's a sable brush. If it's a synthetic brush, then you need like a couple of different sizes because it's just not as versatile. Okay, so I'm gonna start with the center of the flower, and we've got this interesting kind of whorl in the middle that is different than what you would find, say, in a rose or a more evolved flower, so to speak. This is a more ancient kind of flower, actually part of the buttercup family. So I'm going to start just by blocking in the center area. I'm not gonna do these stamen for now. And I'm just gonna start by kind of roughly blocking in the petals, and take some care in the beginning about scale, because the first petals that you draw are going to determine the scale of the entire drawing. So if you start out and you do a few petals and then you realize, like, whoops, this is probably a little too small for me to get in all those details, just erase and start over right away, because yeah, that's just something that gets determined in the very beginning. And then I'm just kind of going out from the middle. All these areas of overlap, I'm going to refine those a little bit later. So right now I just want to get all the flowers and petals into the right position. And kind of making sure that all of the petals radiate out from the center. I'm being kind of nice to you today, because this flower does not include a lot of perspective. It's pretty straight on. So hopefully that makes the drawing just that much more straightforward for everybody. I'll just hold this up since I know the drawing is hard to see, so you can see what I have so far. Like I said, we'll be refining it a little bit. You want to make sure that you've got these kind of irregularities in the positioning and the shape of the flower petals. It can be tempting to draw like a daisy, where like you would do in school, where all the petals are exactly the same and symmetrical, but of course in nature, it's usually not like that. And we really want to capture all these slight irregularities. That's what's going to make the composition interesting and the flower feel kind of organic. So I'm gonna start now. I've got the right number of petals. I've got them more or less in the right position. I'm gonna start erasing some of these extra lines that I use during the sketching process. I'm just using a very gentle white eraser, and this is why it's also important that your drawing is not too dark, because you want to be able to erase things easily without having to rub too hard and damaging the watercolor paper. So now I just want to make sure that I've got the petals overlapping in the way that they are supposed to. So in some cases, I might have not paid enough attention the first time around. And just adding in any little details to the shape of the flower that I might have missed. I know everyone is anxious probably to get to the watercolor part, but because of the level of detail that we're working with here, it does really pay off to spend a bit more time on the drawing, actually. I was just reading a little bit about this type of flower before the class. And when I found this flower, there were all these beautiful butterflies. But what I learned is that they are actually pollinated by the wind. So again, I'm just kind of refining the shape of some of these petals. Trying to make them yeah, kind of focus on the uniqueness of each petal. One of the things that we tend to talk about and just enjoy in the regular workshops is just the meditative process of observation and focusing on all these small details, just using this process as yet another way to appreciate nature. This idea of like getting lost in the details can become really enjoyable once you kind of like get over the initial change in the pace. So somebody is asking about putting the lines in the petals with the pencil. I would say no. That is something that we can do freehand, and I think it doesn't need to be so accurate necessarily because we want it to look very organic. So details like that are within the coloration, I don't like because it's not an outline, it's within the petal. I don't like to draw it with the pencil because then when you paint over it, it can have a more rigid feeling to it. So this is something that we're gonna do. I'll show you how to paint this in freehand. Because with things like coloration and texture, I think it's more important that you get like the feeling of the markings versus like the exact markings themselves. So like if the feeling of the markings is a little bit more loose, it's better to get that looseness, and then say you end up with 3 instead of 4 lines in the petal versus getting it exactly precise, but then it doesn't have that sort of delicateness anymore. You maybe lose that. I think that's what's more important to me in this painting. I think that's something really important with painting in general, is that you often have to choose your focus, your priority when you're representing something, because you can't always get everything across in one painting. And that's kind of also what gives the artist a voice, is even though we're not necessarily trying to paint this in like a expressionistic style, it's still like someone is going to see the things that you chose to focus on and see that through your eyes in a way. So that's like it becomes a decision, for example, like that I want to focus on the delicateness of the lines and the petals versus the accurateness. Sometimes it's like this trade-off. So now, because these are outlined and they're also a different color, the sepals in here, I am going, sorry, the stamen, I am gonna draw as an outline. And I'm probably not gonna draw every single one, to be honest with you, but I'm trying to get the right shape in terms of how far they come out from the center, and the ones that are most prominent, I'm drawing those, and then the ones that are less prominent or like that are underneath, those are gonna be more like approximated. So a quick little aside as we get ready to paint. To me, one of the most challenging things about painting pink flowers is actually just having the right pink on hand, because this really bright pink is something that you cannot mix. That's kind of a pure hue. More complex colors that are duller come about through mixing lots of different colors together. But this really bright pink, for example, you need to have the correct pigment, because any time you mix colors, they are automatically becoming duller. So for these absolutely like brightest colors, that's when you need the pigment. So just to show you, for example, here are two possibilities, and just so you can see the difference between them. So the one on the right is quinacridone magenta, and the one on the left is quinacridone rose. And they're kind of pretty subtly different, but yeah, there's no other way to get these colors than if you have the pigment. So for today, everybody can just use kind of the lightest, brightest pink that you already have in your palette. Take a moment to test them out, like as I've done here, testing them out and seeing which one comes the closest. You might also have something called permanent rose or opera rose or permanent carmine. They're different, or you might not know the name. Just choose something that looks pink on your palette. So just from the paints that you have, choose your kind of lightest, brightest pink. And I'm going to be starting out with the quinacridone rose. And then I'm going to be mixing more of a purple color using the magenta for the lines in the petals. So this is just for your future reference. Next time you're in the art supply store, you can look at these pigments. So someone is saying that it looks quite purple in the picture. So the pink is going to be the starting layer. And the purple is gonna come from the lines like over the top of the petal. So in this technique we're using today, some colors will occur through the layering of the paint versus being mixed in the palette. And yeah, if you have a small pack of primary colors, one thing with you should have a cool red at the very least, and if you mix your cool red with a lot of water, it should become something like a pinkish color. If you use the warm red, it's gonna become more like an orange. That's how you can tell which one is cool and which one is warm. So let's see, I've got this a little bit off screen. I've got my magenta on this other palette. I've got the rose right here. So I'm just gonna start out. I want to start out with my lightest color for this painting. So I'm just gonna start out with the rose, quite diluted. And I'm just gonna do a flat wash, basically approximating like the lightest color in the petal. So I'm actually looking more like at the tips of the petals where it's really light, and I'm going more for that. I'm not really going for like the middle pink that's gonna, or purple that's gonna come later. So this is just starting off like super light, and this is something called a flat wash, and I'm just moving in the direction of the petal across the paper, and I'm just got the minimal amount of paint that I need on the tip of my paintbrush to cover the petal, and not more than that, so I'm not leaving puddles of water behind. And yeah, once I go across one area, I'm just not gonna touch it again until it dries, because we are going to be working with a layering technique, and not a wet into wet technique for today. So you can see there's really like minimal water on my brush here. I'm not leaving any water behind. And with watercolor, you can always go darker, but you can't really go lighter. So for now, since we're filling in the whole petal, we just really want to make sure that we're only using the lightest pink. So even though it's true that there's a lot of purple in this flower, if you really look at the lightest parts, to me anyway, they're quite pink. And that's why we're starting in this way. Oops, there, I ran out of paint a little bit. If you want this first wash to be smooth, it is quite important that you apply like an even, consistent layer, and you don't go back into it once it starts to dry. But if yours ends up being like a little bit more blotchy in the beginning, that's also okay, because with this layering technique, you're going to have the opportunity to paint back over it still. And then sometimes that actually can become like a happy accident that just contributes to the organic look and feel of the painting. Like, I think I have a couple of areas that look a little bit lighter, and it's probably, today was quite sunny in Berlin. I was wearing a bit of sun cream on my face. That's probably just the sun cream getting onto the paper. And as I work through the layers, it won't be so consequential. So now I'm going to add some of the blue and purple in the center of the flower while this is drying. For this first layer, I'm going to be using a combination of cobalt blue and magenta for my purple mixture. I like to use cobalt blue when I'm mixing colors, because some of the other blues, like phthalo blue, can become really overpowering because it's a really dark color. But that also has its advantages, and I'll use that a little bit later for the darkest darks. But if you don't have all these colors I'm talking about, just approximate the best you can the colors that I'm using. So I'm testing out my color. Think this is okay. Oh yeah, you can't see. So I've just got this purple. Could add a little water to it. And so I've been mixing the colors with my brush. My brush is kind of like loaded up with water. So before I do anything else, I'm gonna dry my brush on the paper towel, because sometimes when I'm adding water or mixing paints, I get like a fully loaded brush, and then especially here when I go to do something with fine detail, then I end up with a big puddle, and that's not what I want. So after I'm done mixing, dry my brush, and then go back to the paint and only dip in the tip of the brush. And for this, I'm going to basically be using these short staccato brush strokes. I'm going to hold this up in a second so you can really see it. To achieve this kind of porcupine effect. With lots of white in between. So holding it up for you to see. See if this will focus any better. Sometimes if I put my, oh, come on, focus, please. Well, I think you kind of get the idea. So I'm trying to follow the direction that I see in the photo. And then in the middle here, where you're really seeing these spikes head on, I've just painted them more like dots. And so this is like, okay, this is the first layer. There's gonna come more. But I don't want to have it be too filled in the beginning. I want to have a lot of white in between. Now I'm just gonna take a little bluer version of that purple and start to paint some of these shapes, these round shapes out here. And one of the reasons, well, this is one of the main reasons that I wanted you to make your drawing bigger, right? To get this kind of detail. So I'm even leaving some white here to leave room for some of those highlights. And you're really not going to be able to do that if your original drawing is too small. Then once you get to this point, you just, unless you go in there with, I don't know, like a really tiny brush and a magnifying glass, you're gonna have a hard time to get this level of detail. You'll have to maybe leave some detail out in that case. If you see like a super detailed painting like online or in a book, in a guidebook, or chances are the original painting was a lot larger, and that gives this impression of like really super amount of detail when it gets shrunken down. Okay, so now I'm going to Oh, the porcupine bits was cobalt blue plus magenta. So now I'm ready to go in with a little more purplish pink. So I'm mixing in a little cobalt blue to my pink. I'm gonna go back into the petals now. I still don't want it to be too dark because again, I can always go darker. That's not a problem, but I can't necessarily go lighter. And I'm just gonna start to add in some of this detail, and I'm going to also add in some of the shadows where the petals overlap. And like some places where the petals might get a little darker, where there's an indentation. Just gonna start adding in some of this texture. It might look a little bit disjointed in the beginning, but that's not going to be such a problem in the end. So the purple is like kind of slowly making its way into the petals now. And I'm not really doing like the darkest bits of contrast yet, just more like medium. Perfect. For this kind of coloring in, I want to add a little more water. So this can be quite subtle. And just making sure the parts that are the lightest, that I'm still leaving those like really light. And I can add a little bit of water on the edge, just using a damp brush if I want to blend something a bit more. So by adding this little darker color, but not necessarily adding it everywhere, then the lightest pink gets to be kind of the lightest color now. if that makes sense, because I'm leaving some places the original lightest pink. And yeah, one of the nice things about building up the painting gradually in this way is that every layer doesn't necessarily need to be perfect, and you're able to build up a lot of detail in a painting gradually. You don't have to do it all at once, which I find really nice, especially if you want to learn watercolor, but it isn't like this pressure to do everything in the first layer, which can often be the case if you're using the wet into wet technique, like where you're blending the colors while they're wet. So I'm just gradually building up like this depth of color. I've already gone over some places in the very first petals that I did. Just blend this here at the bottom with a damp brush. I'm also going gradually because I know I find it to be a pretty big temptation with really bright colors like this to add too much color, get too excited about the bright color, but adding too much, like getting the color too opaque, it doesn't necessarily make the color brighter. It actually can make the color duller because you actually lose the white of the paper that way. And I'm just going in with a little bit more purple in some places. Again, like you don't necessarily need to paint the whole petal purple to be able to read a bit of purple in it, if that makes sense. Sometimes adding like these purple accents can show the color actually in a really nice, subtle way. So I've just got a little more blue in this mixture that I'm using now. And I'm just looking for areas that to me look a little more purple, seem to be maybe cooler. Some of these little shadows. I think I will let that dry for a minute and maybe work a little bit more on this middle area. I'm going to add, before I get too dark here, I'm gonna add a really light green. Wash in the center, because you see this green coming through. And I'll hold this up. Sorry, this isn't focusing that good. I don't know actually why it isn't. The green that I've used here is a little bit more yellow than the green in the photograph. And the reason for that is because it's just gonna add more contrast with the purple and pop out more, which I think will just be like painterly more interesting. We want this to pop out because it is popping forward. And since yellow is a complementary color to purple, it's going to, like, adding more yellow into the green is going to just make it pop out. Okay, now I'm just going to start with these lines in the petals. So again, it's like the more purple version of the pink is what we want. Again, we don't want it to be too dark, but we want it to have enough contrast. So let's just see. I think this looks pretty good. And these lines, I'm going to do them with like a kind of quick movement of the brush so that they get this tapered effect. And these should really like follow the contours. These lines should follow the contours of the petals really nicely. So I'm kind of flicking my wrist when I make these lines. If you don't make it to the end of the petal, it's okay. You can also leave like a little break in the line. It just makes it look more delicate and more organic that way. If you have too much paint on your brush, the line is just gonna look thicker. And if you have maybe not enough paint on your brush, you might not make, the line might not be long enough, but you can always just go back and make it a little longer. Hold this up again so you can see what I'm doing. The video should be on the blog in a few days, but it'll also be announced in one of our newsletters once it's ready. Someone was asking about it. And remember, these lines are not always exactly straight. Sometimes they have a little curve to them because they're following the contour of the petal, which isn't always just a completely solid, straight plane. And I can, of course, go back and with the very tip of my brush and with more concentrated paint, and I can sharpen up some of these lines, like at the base here where they appear a little bit sharper. I can go back over some of those with a darker purple if I want. I think this has a nice effect actually of having these darker lines coming out from the center, giving a little more contrast there. So this is just another example of why I think this layering technique works so well. It would be really difficult to get this variation in the intensity and in the color of this line in just one pass, but here we can just break it up into multiple passes and get all the variation that we desire. Okay, so now I'm going to use a combination of phthalo blue, which is a very dark staining blue, and magenta, which can also be quite dark. And I'm going to mix a very dark purple, and I'm going to start to add in some of the darkest darks. Exciting moment. And here again, I'm really using like the tip of my brush. And I'm trying to not block in large areas of dark. So even though there are really dark sections around the center of the flower, I want to leave little bits of the lighter layers poking through. Because this is not a solid shape. These are very small, delicate shapes, and they have light reflecting off of them in different ways. And since I'm not going for like a completely photorealistic approach here, leaving these bits of white showing through, it allows for a detailed look. And of course, I would say this is very detailed, but it isn't like photorealism in that I am painting like every single detail in an exact way. So it's very detailed, but it isn't necessarily like 100% precise because I am taking some liberties in the texture here. If I wanted to do this in a very photorealistic way, then I would actually need to make the painting even larger. And hold that up so you can see how that's starting to take shape. And then I got this kind of pinker, little pinker dark purple as well. So now I'm painting over this lime green that I added in there before. I think what I want to do is just on some of these lighter parts of these round shapes, I'm just gonna add a bit of the cobalt blue. Because it does have like this bluish kind of reflected light. Gonna add, I don't want to completely cover up the white, so I'm doing it in a very subtle way, but I'm just adding some blue in there. And now that I have my darkest darks, I can look at the color of the petals and decide if I need to make it brighter anywhere. So I think I might actually just go back one more time with my pink. If you are someone who is more in the purple camp, you can of course make it a little more purple. And then I can add just a bit more of bright color in some places. And also if there are some places where I feel like the lines in the petals are standing out too much and I want it to look more blended in, I can always do that by adding more color. But just be careful about making the petals too opaque, because then they're gonna actually lose a little brightness if you do that. So it is this balance between having enough saturated color and also letting the light show through. So the darkest darks, I used the phthalo blue and the magenta, and that gives you a very dark, almost black purple if you want it. So for me, this is getting pretty close to done because I don't want this to lose its brightness. I can with just a damp brush without any color on it at all. I can blend a little bit the color if I want at the edges, the color that I just added that's still wet. But I actually kind of like the unevenness of the brush strokes because I think it looks a little bit more organic. But I'll just make it a little more blended so you can see how it would look. I've left a little bit of contrast here so that the some of the petals are getting lighter towards the center. This contrast might be a little bit more than in the photograph. But for me, I think it's nice to have that contrast to separate a little bit the different parts of the flower so you can see it, the structure more clearly. So my spring workshop that starts on Tuesday, we're going to be doing, of course, a lot of wildflowers and bright colors. I think spring is a really fun time of year to do botanical painting, and I always choose very seasonal specimens for us to paint. So it'll be really nice to paint lots of flowers and lots of bright colors. Maybe learn a little bit more about flower structure. Oops. I think somebody just shared their screen by accident. And all of you who participated in this class, you will receive a follow-up email afterwards with a little coupon code if you want to join my spring class, just as a little added incentive. And if you're interested in doing more free classes, we've also got, I think almost all of the previous free classes we've got on our blog as video recordings. Always find a place to add a little more detail. And I'm going to add the Latin name down here of this flower. Anemone hortensia. For current workshop offerings, please visit our website. Thank you for watching.